This has happened an awful lot. And in my life, whenever it's happened to somebody I know, I've always come out fighting for them as hard as I can. It happened recently to my friend Roger Scruton. It happened some years ago to my friend Ayan Hirsi Ali. And I always fight to defend them because they're my friends, and I know it's a lie. But here's the problem. Most people aren't in that situation. Most people don't have anyone who can come out and fight on their side, or they don't have anyone with platforms to come out on their side, or with any credibility, as it were. And they don't, and the person who the accusations are being made of doesn't have any significant body of work to go to. So you just don't know. I mean, there was a case with the Asda supermarket worker recently who was fired for liking this Billy Connolly video. And of course, that also demonstrates the retreat. I mean, Billy Connolly makes one joke about Islam 15 years ago or 10 years ago or something. And it's so unusual that it occasionally goes around the internet again as people, just are quite pleased that there's a guy laughing at suicide bombers because nobody else has the guts to do that, which is pretty damn amazing just to start with. But this thing goes around the internet sometimes. It goes around and the guy at Asda likes it. Bang, he's fired. Well, again, the guy at Asda isn't in a circle of writers and thinkers and doesn't have... And then you're like, do I have time to dig through the Asda supermarket workers' back Facebook stuff?
Yeah. This is why I think we're quite privileged in a way that we do say what we want and we can. But I always think about this. If I was still working as a teacher, I wouldn't make jokes. I wouldn't tweet the way that I tweet.
Well, here's one way you could start to address this. Everybody, everywhere, stand up for your mates.
Yeah,
when you know
totally
they're
agree.
being lied about.
Yeah.
Always do that.
Yeah.
And, if more people around each of these cases that could happen with, maybe we get somewhere.
I think that's a really good time. Should we take it out to the audience? Let's do it. Loads of hands. Okay. Who do you like the look of most?
No. You do it because.
Oh, okay. Okay, we'll go here. Would you mind standing up when you ask the question so that we can get your?
Yeah, for sure.
Image.
What was it about me you like the look of?
That was a very very suggestive opening.
Let's we'll talk afterwards. Anyway.
Douglas. So I loved both your books. I'm 20. I've got to be honest. I'm 20 pages away from completing Madness of Crowds, but I think I get the gist. I am going to finish it.
No, there's a big twist at the end.
Yeah, big twist. He was dead all along.
I'm a lady. Oh my god. So your first book was obviously largely immigration. Your most recent book is about the problematic identity politics and the identities. And so it seems you're, with the most recent books, hitting the sort of difficult conversations. So I wonder, what is it, are you going to continue that theme? And if so, is it going to be like climate change, or what is the next difficult thing to be tackled?
Gosh. Let me just very quickly, thank you for the excellent question, with one corrective, you tread on a slight authorial sore point. I've written 5 books. It's the last 2 that have sold particularly well. And that's... I regret that my book on Northern Ireland didn't fall off the shelves. It did fall off the shelves. It didn't fly. But no, my last 2, you're right. If you are interested in taboos and dogmas, and if you are, for whatever reason, wired not to mind treading on them, this is a great time to be alive. It's a really great time to be alive. And I just think that dogmas and orthodoxies tell you so much about the time you're living in. It's like archaeology, like living archaeology. You see everything of what's actually going on in our society by looking at the things that you're not meant to talk about. I think that the other thing is, of course, is really what I want to do is not that I think we just need to talk about them and say any old crap. It's that I think we need to be able to interrogate and contend with the difficult issues in a reasonable manner. And I tried to do that. Are there some left? I'm thinking about them.
Just the lady at the back there.
Well, it looked like a little flirting going on there between a fan in the audience in the question and answer session and Douglas Murray and Andrew Doyle. And they both had a little bit of a laugh about it. But, we'll get to Douglas's answer in a second in terms of what he's sort of thinking. He basically said that he does have a lot of ideas for his next book, and that this is the time actually, to be alive if you're into that kind of thing in terms of delving into the taboos and I guess the wokeness of different cultures in different areas and how these things are basically being, spread about by the various factions, that are doing it. And you obviously have the ability to write about it and the platform to enunciate all this. And speaking of platforms, where Douglas is saying that people need to stand up for what they truly believe is right. And if enough people do it, then that's how you're going to be able to help those that do get into these kind of situations. Now, as Andrew basically said, both of them are quite privileged to be able to, first of all, have something like this, a microphone, a megaphone, in which they're able to go ahead and speak out against injustices that they hear. But like he said, there's so many of these things that are happening that how do you go about helping each and every single individual? And then let's say, for example, you decide to back someone, but then there's something in that person's background that actually does have something to do with what he said or did, and he hid that. Like, for example, someone who people say he's a Nazi, and all of a sudden you decide to come up behind this person and say he's not a Nazi. And then all of a sudden there's something that's found out that that person actually used to belong to or did, was of the Nazi at one time, was in the Nazi party, or whatever the reason is. Just a small smidgen of something that somebody did in the past like that. And then all of a sudden, boom, you're a Nazi sympathizer. And the press will take that small little thing because you can't just be, and I'm going to digress a little bit by saying that it's sort of like you can't be half pregnant. Now, could somebody have had Nazi ideas brought up that way and then denounces them? Oh, absolutely. And has changed their ways, redemption, and now basically says that, for whatever reasons. I mean, isn't that the same thing happened with Majid Nawaz in terms of where he was in the terrorist camp? He did travel to Egypt. He was trying to overthrow the government of Egypt. He was put in jail. And then he found while he was in jail that what he was being taught, what they preached to him, what his mentors told him was completely wrong. And he comes out there and completely transforms his life. And now basically is trying to fight the same type of thinking that took him in the wrong direction. But the problem is that the press, the media, when they seize on something like that, depending upon how deep they want to take that bite, they will go after that person relentlessly until that person is just absolutely crucified in public opinion. And most people do not have a platform to fight against that. And unfortunately, that's just the truth. So that's what we have on tap for you today, folks. We got the question and answer session here between Andrew Doyle and Douglas Murray, and we're going to get to that in the next few seconds. But you're watching the Dr. Nasir Shaikh Show. I'm your host, Dr. Nasir, where I give you my political prescription from my political perspective of what happens when you have people like Andrew Doyle, Douglas Murray meet with the audience and talking about culture, religion, politics, what's next in terms of free speech, speech laws, hate speech laws, religion, government, all that stuff comes crashing together. Let's get back to the Q&A right now.
The far right. Not the far right, you know what It's most of the audience, probably.
I'm a woman, I can't be on the far right.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
And actually, that was the point I was going to make, because we, in my last session, I went to the one on toxic culture in politics, and Doyle and Cummins, who was on the platform, said that in the past, the left would be on a march singing a song, "We hate the Tories, we hate the Tories, we hate the Tories, Tories, we hate you." And then you'd kind of join them because you also hate the Tories, so therefore you must be left wing. And I really agreed with your point about the fact that, you know, if you're black, you're left wing, you're a radical left winger. And so those people who are black who support the right wing, they're, going against the cause. But I wanted to just ask a question. I am a teacher, so there are lots of things that I'm not allowed to say, including plastics in the ocean isn't the biggest problem that the children face. But I did have a child. I'm a primary school teacher. I teach years 6. And I had a child last year who was LGBT. And we had a difficult conversation in the summer term where we said to her, we're not going to let you change your name on the register because we have 4-year-olds in the school that we would have to explain it all to everybody in the school. It's not a good time for you to do this. Wait till you go to secondary school and, you know, then you can explore it a bit more. But I had lots of conversations with her mum, who said don't tell her dad because they hadn't talked about it yet. But the biggest problem that I think professionals and parents are coping with in terms of this sort of issue is the question of suicide, the worry of suicide and the worry of mental health. And I just wondered whether you'd kind of found out anything about how this feeds into the woke culture. Because as a parent, if your child says, if you don't let me do this, I'm going to commit suicide, where do you go with that? And as a teacher, where do you go with that? Because the last thing you want to do is find that a child has committed suicide and you feel like it's your fault. And I think that's that mental health thing and the suicide thing is where these things become quite powerful.
I think, Douglas, you'll know more, you've done more research into that.
I spoke to quite a lot of people for this book who themselves had transitioned or started transitioning and stopped, and also the parents of people who had. And I now fairly regularly find at events and other things people coming up to me who are in this position. The first thing is, I think that down the road we will discover that there is some crossover of mental illness and what we put into part of the trans thing. And that I think we're going to discover that autism in particular, I'm not saying that's the same thing as mental illness, but there's a crossover of autism with trans claims in particular. And that's already, I've just in my own research, I've come across too many cases of this. A child is diagnosed to be autistic and somewhere down the road then says trans. So this needs really careful picking apart. As for this specific thing, look, the idea in Britain and America at the moment is you have to affirm that once a child says they're trans, you have to affirm, because everything that isn't affirmed. I have a quote from an American doctor who says this very clearly. She says, what's the price of not affirming your child's identity? It's not having a child. Agree with me or your child will commit suicide. Wow. What a thing to just wave through. My own view would be on this, I think the right thing with a child of that age, and the school should not decide to do a free fall. I think there's far more trauma in my own experience of looking at this. There's far more trauma in all of the other children being told that at any point they may change sex than in trying to hold that line at least during the school years. And I think that we have a big problem as a society if we're held hostage by people threatening their own lives at us. This is a really tricky one. I don't need to tell you that. But in most situations, if somebody says, do what I want or I may kill myself, we try to be understanding, but we're not infinitely so. Like, we're not completely blackmailed into anything they want us to be blackmailed into by that. This is a hellish area. I don't envy all the teachers and others who have to deal with it at the front line.
I think really, for me, the problem is we haven't been able to have the conversations. And I think particularly when it comes to children. I saw a documentary about trans kids, which was on the BBC. And there was an American couple, and the man was saying, I love looking at my child now because I see my little girl running. I don't have to look at my little boy mincing about. And what is really happening there is he's fixing a gay kid, isn't he? I mean, and I do worry about this idea that there's a kind of rehabilitated homophobia at the bottom of this.
Yes.
That really a tomboy could just be.
Wow, wow, wow. What an absolute point question that's posed by that teacher there, saying that, I mean, we're only human. Only human. When she's asking the question, when she was talking, I could feel my emotions being tugged at. People would feel, all people with kind-hearted, good-natured, feelings that just love and adore children are gonna have these kind of feelings that to say, yeah, wow. I mean, if somebody said that, and God forbid somebody did that, how is that going to affect you for the rest of your life, thinking that somebody came to you, a child, and it's a child who's confused, having gender dysphoria, and you decided to sort of skirt the issue, or we'll talk about it, but you didn't really hit the issue head on because you were afraid to, and then you find out something happened. Or in the case of like Douglas was saying, I mean, what a hellish place to be in. If a child tells a parent this, and the parent decides, or whatever, takes time, or they want to talk about it. In the meantime, the child goes ahead and does something. Now the parents are going to be thinking, oh, I should have let him do it. These are tough, tough, tough decisions. And like Douglas was saying, I don't envy the position of this teacher. I'm a parent, but my children are grown. But then again, are we going to be held hostage to everybody? What if a child says, you know what, if we don't have testing scores, if we don't have this, we're going to do this, we're going to commit suicide. You know what? We're going to run away from home. I'm not never going to talk to you. I don't want you to be my parents anymore. If you do this, if you do that, if you don't do what I say, X, Y, Z, that's going to happen. I mean, where do we draw the line? Where does tough love start? It has to begin somewhere. It has to start somewhere. Situation becomes is nobody wants to start with themselves. It's always the other person out there. When it comes to ourselves, it's a whole different story. All the way around. It's just very tough. Anyways, folks, we appreciate you taking the time to watch. You've been watching the Dr. Nasir Shaikh Show. I've been your host. My name is Dr. Nasir. If you haven't done so already and you really like the content, subscribe to the channel. You know what to do. Like, share, and follow us. Check out our other video links above and below. Comments down below too. My final thought, when you're right, and when you're left, you're wrong. Until next time, folks, take care and stay safe.